Okay, the second part of Charge of the Light Brigade. We've set the scene. The British Army, the Light Brigade, are charging in to attack the Russian forces who are on a much more advantageous position on the hillside, and mistakenly the soldiers have been given the command on their horses with their swords to head into the valley to be shot at by cannons. And that's the point we pick up now in the third and fourth stanzas. So cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian, reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. Okay, one of the key things we're going to look at here are verbs, and we'll come on to the verbs later. But we'll start by the setting of the scene. You've got cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them. Look at that repetition of the cannon. And you can see that emphasises the scale of their task, the danger, how victory seems unlikely. They're pretty much surrounded, and the only way back from those cannons is to have the cannons behind them. We'll look at that in stanza 5 actually. And that would be a retreat. And of course, this is not what the British Army's about. They're not about a retreat. They're about a charge and moving forward. So that repetition gives that sense of the danger and the inevitability again of the death. But also you've got that rhythm, cannon to the left of them, cannon to the right of them, cannon in front of them. You've got that rhythm again, gathering pace of the horses galloping towards the Russians. Okay, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Said we were going to talk about some verbs, and there's 3 verbs, 3 really violent, active verbs: volleyed, thundered, stormed, again emphasising that scale. And if you combine that with the repetition of the cannons, you can see the difficulties. But also, once you've emphasised the scale of the opposition, the scale of the enemy, the unlikelihood, the inevitability of death, the only way to go from there is just how brave the soldiers were to go into that battle. And so we get this adverb, boldly. Boldly they rode and well. And that boldly really contrasts with that. No matter the unlikelihood of their victory, no matter the scale of the army and the task facing them, they were going to do their job. And they did it boldly, with courage, with bravery. And that adverb is so crucial. And Tennyson moves that adverb to the start of the line to emphasise just how much admiration we're supposed to have for these soldiers. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Now, we've got the personification here of death, the jaws of death, the mouth of hell, as if they're being eaten up and gobbled. So that idea of the personification suggests again that surrounding nature of the enemy, that they've gone right into the mouth of the army, and the jaws suggest they're going to be crushed, they're going to be defeated. But the personification also emphasises that bravery, because they've gone in there. Also the certainty, there's 3 different layers to it, isn't it? It's that bravery, the certainty of death, because it's not into the jaws of difficulty or into the jaws of the battle, it's the jaws of death. And Tennyson chooses that deliberately to show the certainty that some of the soldiers will die, which again emphasises the bravery. But it also emphasises the futility. What futility means is the absolute pointlessness of it. There was no chance for the soldiers to succeed. But whenever you've got that sense of inevitability and futility, that they've got no chance, you must also be looking at how Tennyson presents them as brave and bold in order for actually doing that, in order for actually going into the battle in the first place. Because remember, Tennyson is writing this almost as a piece of propaganda. He's showing the public back at home the skill and bravery and ability of the British soldiers. So whenever you've got that sense of doubt, as we have with the futility of the jaws of death and the mouth of hell, as we had in stanza 2 with was there a man dismayed, that rhetorical question. You've always got to juxtapose that and contrast with the fact that Tennyson is presenting these soldiers as brave, as skillful, as dynamic. You must get that sense in, because that's the overall tone of the poem. And that tone is most interesting in stanza 4. We've talked about the cannons, we've talked about the scale of the task, we've talked about how inevitable their death is, how unlikely it is, but we've got the really interesting juxtaposition of verbs in stanza 4. And these are going to be our key quotes for this particular session. And I've done them in black and red and emphasised it a little bit more here. Flashed, sabring, charged. They all apply to the British Army. Reeled, shattered, sundered. They all apply to the Russian and Cossack army. Okay? So how do we contrast those? Well, flashed. You've got the idea of the speed of the sword, the sunlight catching off the sword, almost reminiscent of Kamikaze, when the fish turn and it flashes silver. But you've got that speed and that skill of the British swordsmanship. Sabring. We've talked about how a sabre is a type of sword, so it suggests that they were plunging their swords into the Russian soldiers. It gives a sense of victory almost. Charged. Think about how they're going forward. And if you're going forward, you're on the attack, you're an advantage. So all of those verbs, and there's more, plunged, broke, all of those verbs used to suggest that the British Army are on top, are likely to succeed, are more skillful, are braver, all of those ideas. Whereas, in contrast, the juxtaposition is that the Russians are described through verbs of defeat. They reeled. If you reel from something, you back away from it. They're shattered. They're sundered. All of that idea that they're defeated. They're being beaten. They're being killed. And it comes back to the sibilants of the third stanza, where stormed, shot, shell, to emphasise the speed of battle. And here, shattered and sundered suggests the speed of the British is much quicker than the speed of the Russians. Now, all of that, if you just took those verbs, would suggest that the British gained an incredible, unlikely victory. Of course they didn't. But Tennyson wants to present that the British Army only lost because of the sheer numbers and unlikeliness of their possible victory. And he doesn't want to emphasise that the Russians were better in any way. They simply won because they had more numbers. And those verbs suggest that the British were more skillful and the Russians were defeated. But then look at the last two lines of that stanza 4. Then they rode back, but not the 600. And that repetition of not is absolutely crucial, because here Tennyson is emphasising that many of them did not return. Not the 600. And that double not there, that repetition, just highlights the scale of the 2/3 who were injured and were killed in that particular battle.